I have a pretty stunning moment to show you from yesterday's edition of Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, where she confronts the MAGA Republican governor of Arkansas and former Trump press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders on her contradictory stance on the quote-unquote sanctity of life. And while she'll trot that out in relation to her stance on abortion, it seems to go by the wayside when she's talking about the well-being of mothers, for example. And this is something that isn't called out to the faces of these politicians anywhere close to enough, but it's super important. And after watching the clip, we'll get to how this connects to a larger point about many Republicans and the game that gets played. So watch this clip for the individual topic being brought up and the way that Sarah Huckabee Sanders brutally dodged the question completely, but also the larger trend being pointed out, which is essentially talk is cheap, one's actions tell the true story. Here it is.
So your state, you're talking about the sanctity of life. Your state had one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, according to the CDC, up until about 2021. Arkansas is one of the few states that hasn't extended postpartum care for mothers. Why don't you want those moms to get care for a full 12 months, as is being offered, instead of just 60 days?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with the premise of your question, saying that I don't want that. I certainly want us to do everything that we can to help during pregnancy and well after a child is born, which is why we have done things like focus on the foster and adoption care. We've put significant funding into our pregnancy crisis centers. We're focusing on things that help our mothers, including bring your kids to work at state government. We've expanded maternity leave for state employees. We included that in our education package. We have taken a number of steps that are very positive in this front, and we're going to continue to do that as long as I'm governor.
But the states of Mississippi, Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, they did extend for 12 months rather than the 60 days. So I'm just wondering specifically on that option, why you opted out.
We're going to continue to look at options that we feel like best help people here in the state of Arkansas. We've done that in a number of ways, and we're going to continue to do that over the course of hopefully the next 7 years while I'm governor of Arkansas.
So I want to run through a bunch of facts to respond to that, and stick around for all of what I have for you in this segment because it's super valuable stuff. I know sometimes when I start breaking down the numbers on things and the exciting confrontation's over, people watching on YouTube at least click to another video. Stay for the super important substantive stuff as well. So first off, specifically to Margaret Brennan's point, Arkansas does have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, the fifth highest to be specific. And interestingly, the horrible California that Republicans say has gone to hell has the lowest maternal mortality rate. They're leading the way in addressing it. And by the way, none of what I'm about to go through is about beating up on Arkansas. It's about pointing out the flawed priorities of politicians like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, which I'll highlight in just a second. But first, to continue bolstering Margaret Brennan's point in terms of supporting mothers, the particular policy she was referencing was this from KFF inside the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which I'll note every Republican voted against. This was a Democratic policy, is a less noticed provision that makes a major change to Medicaid coverage for low-income pregnant and postpartum women, addressing the long-standing gap for people who have had their maternity care covered by Medicaid, especially those in states that have not expanded Medicaid as permitted by the ACA. Then jumping over to a piece published through Georgetown University, only 3 states, Arkansas, Idaho, and Iowa, adjourned their 2023 legislative sessions without taking action to extend postpartum Medicaid coverage. And I should note that nearly half of all births nationally are covered under Medicaid. So this is a massively consequential policy. And Arkansas, as was noted in that article, is one of only 3 states to have avoided extending postpartum coverage, what would have been in part supported by the federal government because of Joe Biden and Democrats. But that's socialism, I guess, right? So who wants healthier and happier moms? Ugh, that would be woke or something. So if Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Arkansas Republicans aren't focused on postpartum care what are they focused on, I guess, is the question that has to be asked. Well, let's go through some of Huckabee Sanders' greatest hits in the last year, some of which we've discussed. She signed legislation into law that rolled back child labor protections, the Protect the Kids Party. Gotta teach them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Horrible. She bravely took on the fight against woke, banning, and this is not satire, banning quote unquote woke words from state documents. Yeah, she of course fought back against CRT, as all Republican governors seem to, the thing that wasn't being taught in elementary schools, but they banned it anyways. What a brave action to take. And in line with that, Arkansas removed accreditation for graduation for the course AP African American Studies for high schoolers. And I want to show you Sarah Huckabee Sanders' answer when she was asked about that particular bit of news, because it's everything people dislike about politicians. She denies the AP African American Studies won't count as a graduation credit. So she says, no, that's not happening in my state, but then goes on to justify why that happened. Just a whole lot of words to mean nothing. Take a look.
There's a little bit of controversy right now. There's an accusation that the Arkansas Education Department removed credit for controversial AP African American Studies course. Let me just read to you what the NAACP said and let you respond. They said the Arkansas State Conference of the NAACP is appalled at the recent decision of Arkansas Department of Education to make a hasteful decision at the final hour to do away with AP African American Studies. Is that really what happened there?
Absolutely not. And one of the things that we have talked about so much, and Dana, I think the point that you made a minute ago about the staggering numbers that we're seeing across this country, we've got to get back to the basics of teaching math, of teaching reading, writing, and American history. And we cannot perpetuate a lie to our students and push this propaganda, leftist agenda, teaching our kids to hate America and hate one another. It's one of the reasons that we put into law banning things like indoctrination and CRT. We want our kids to receive a quality education, and we want to make sure that every student has access to it and a pathway to prosperity, and that's exactly what we're doing here in the state of Arkansas.
It made absolutely no sense. Did you do this thing? No. But also, if we did it, it's totally fine because we're getting rid of CRT and indoctrination or something. Let's get back to the basics, like reading, math, and writing. Interesting that she would bring that up because her state ranks 43rd out of 50 on education, a ranking which heavily weighs reading, math, and writing test scores. So maybe, Sarah, you should spend a little less time on fighting woke and a little bit more time on addressing that. And that goes for crime, too. Again, not to beat up on Arkansas, but to point out that electing MAGA Republicans like Huckabee Sanders is not the solution to their problems. Arkansas has the 5th highest overall crime rate, according to a World Population Review breakdown this year. They also have the 6th highest poverty rate in the country. So I say all of that to point out that it's not just Sarah Huckabee Sanders who plays these games while ignoring real problems. And she's not the reason for Arkansas's high crime rate and high poverty rate. That has been an issue for a really long time. The point I'm trying to make is that, number one, instead of focusing on fighting back against wokeness and targeting certain communities so that she can get on Fox News, she should be investing in postpartum care, for example. She could be focusing on addressing crime, poverty, etc. Those could be her priorities, but they're not. Instead, she's rolling back child labor protections, doing nothing about gun violence. Again, the Protect the Kids Party, the leading cause of death for American children is firearms. And this is a trend we've seen in the Republican Party for a long time. That's the larger, super important point. Using these culture war issues like CRT or drag queens or woke words, whatever that means, to distract from the issues they aren't solving. Fearmonger about how Biden is making communism happen in America so that you don't have to answer for why you aren't taking him up on his American Rescue Plan postpartum care extension policy, so that you don't have to answer for why you oppose the Inflation Reduction Act that will save seniors significant amounts of money on their prescription drugs because Medicare can finally negotiate drug prices, something, by the way, that Donald J. Trump promised to do and didn't. And insulin costs have been capped at $35 out of pocket per month something opposed by Republicans. They talk about fighting woke, so they don't have to talk about why they opposed all these things. Biden's infrastructure law, which is investing in clean and reliable drinking water, roads, bridges, broadband. By the way, broadband going out to the very rural communities many Republicans represent. It's benefiting their constituents, but they fought against it. You get the point. It's the very policies like the American Rescue Plan, Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Law, PACT Act, Chips and Science Act, etc. that Republicans so often call horrible, and Biden's radical left woke agenda that are the sorts of common sense policies that could help to improve the lives of their constituents. And on that note, it's time to play one of my favorite clips of Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse calling this out.
They're relying on a new magic budget word. That word is woke. The House Budget Chairman says his budget will be modeled after a draft budget put together by Trump's budget director, Russ Vought, which uses the phrase woke 77 times. I think the previous record for the use of the term woke in budgets is 0 always. Call everything woke and then try to cut its funding seems to be the strategy. Housing, woke, chop it in half. Public schools and job training, woke, slash it. Auditing tax cheats, woke, let's not do that. Fighting climate change, woke, none of that. Healthy food for kids and families, woke, cut it. Medicaid, health insurance, heating assistance, cut, cut, cut. From behind this new catchphrase, Republicans want workers and families to line up behind the tax cheaters, behind the polluters, behind the campaign donors, behind the well-connected and the well-off whom they serve. Well, their problem is you can say woke for a while, but then people will notice that they no longer have disability benefits, or that they can't afford their prescription drugs, or that huge corporations are paying nothing in taxes. The woke screen is a smoke screen, and people need to see through it.
Say that again, Sheldon?
The woke screen is a smoke screen, and Americans need to see through it to what Republicans are really trying to do.
Did you just come up with that?
And I will leave this segment on that. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you want to go a step further, you can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. You can click the alert bell just to make sure you get notifications, which is next to the subscribe button. And podcast listeners, make sure to rate and review.